Welcome everybody to this month's Money Gym Masterclass. This month we're talking about what's going on with cost of living. I think this is a topic which has been in the news, worrying lots of people at the moment. So I think what we're aiming to do in today's session is to go into a little bit more of detail about what's going on, what can we reasonably expect. Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball, but we'll try our best to figure out what to expect. And then we'll talk about some of the things that might, and the emphasis there being might, what some of the things that might be able to help you kind of to deal with what I think for everyone's going to be a tough few months ahead. So slightly different setup today. We're all in the same room here today, but hopefully that will sort of make things easier to have a bit more of a kind of a free-flowing conversation. As always, I think we're going to make lots of time for questions and answers and a bit of discussion towards the end. So we'll try and keep the kind of the presentation element of it to a minimum, so we're not just kind of talking at you. But without further ado, let me introduce my two colleagues here today. So for those of you that have joined previous sessions, I'm Ben West. I do business development here at London Mutual. We're looking at ways that we can sort of make our products and services more useful to our members and easier to use. Those of you that have attended previous sessions will know Monica well. Monica, as well as being our in-house kind of travel and holiday guru, Monica is our member experience manager, where her focus is on making our products and services work as well as possible for all of our members, and making them really easy and simple to use. And then a new face we'd like to welcome this month. This is Linz. Linz is our new digital marketing officer, and so this is Linz's first ever Money Gym Masterclass. So please make sure she's welcome. It's not that scary, promise. And we'll go from there. So as I say, just in terms of what we'll be covering today. I think place to start is we'll be looking at what exactly is going on with cost of living, looking a little bit beyond the kind of some of the quite scary headlines, and to figure out what actually is going on here, and what's driving it, what's causing some of these prices and things like that to go up. I think we'll talk a little bit more, because I think these things always have a personal impact, and the impact on all of us will be very different. But what it could mean for each of us as individuals. And I think before we get onto the Q&A, I think we'll talk a little bit about possible ways to manage and how your credit union could help. And you'll notice that a lot of that's in brackets there, because I think when we're talking about the cost of living crisis, I think we've got to be very mindful that we're all in different situations financially and in other ways. I think it's going to affect us all, but actually it's a very individual thing, and what it will mean for some people will be different for others. And so I think it would be wrong for us as a credit union to say these are the things that you do, and if you do these things, everything's going to be fine, because for lots of people it won't always be fine. And actually and we'll talk a little bit about what to do if you find yourself in that situation. But I think before, I don't want you coming on to today's session thinking that you're going to get all the answers to how everything's going to be fine through the cost of living crisis, because that's not the case. But we're going to talk about some of the things that might be helpful in terms of ideas or places to start and ways to start thinking about some of those things. And then, as I say, we'll allow plenty of time for the Q&A. So, starting point, guys. The cost in the shops, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Everything's going up, right?
Yeah, I think it's not possible not to see it. Every day you go to the shop, the prices, like for the goods you usually buy every day, bread, milk, butter. You can see how the numbers of the labels are changing like quickly. Before, I remember when I arrived here like years ago, the prices stayed more or less the same within the years of time. Recently, the price of milk has changed, I don't know, 3-4 times. I kind of lost the counting now, but like it's getting scary. But obviously, there is a lot of things we can do about it. There are things obviously we cannot do about it. So we will give you some tips on that.
Linz.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen a lot of stuff going on with the news headlines, social media. I've seen people of protests. I've seen people are obviously frantic about it, understandably. And for me, what I have noticed, especially with regards to doing like my grocery shopping, like for me, I have like a monthly budget that I normally stick to per month when I'm doing my groceries. And now I've gotten to a point where I need to reevaluate that budget, because it's not cutting it anymore, because prices have gone up for certain things. So the budget that I set for myself in the beginning, it's not necessarily working for me at the moment. I have to reevaluate that and see what I could potentially do, to
Yeah.
try to keep within means.
And, and some people's idea of necessities are other people's sort of, luxuries and all the rest of it. But I think, no matter where, no matter what sort of lifestyle you're used to,
Yeah.
there are going to be aspects of that which for everybody's going to change, right? And I think, actually, when you, whether you listen to the radio, watch the news, or read the paper, it's pretty hard to avoid lots of this stuff. And let's face it, lots of it's pretty scary. £2,000 cost of living. Sure, I haven't got £2,000.
Yes.
Energy bill tip £3,000 a year. They were only, they were a third of that a year ago. So lots of really scary stuff. And I think it's also important to say this isn't stuff that's coming down the track. This is stuff that for many people is already here, and particularly if even a year ago things were already tough for you, things are getting tougher. I think before we get all too doom and gloom and start wallowing too much in that, I think before we kind of go ahead with our conversation today, I think it's important to just sort of define a little bit what we're talking about here. And I think what we're talking about here, and there's quite a nice definition which you researched, Lynn, which is up here. So I think when we're talking about cost of living crisis today, we're talking about a situation in which the cost of everyday essentials, so as we talked about, that's groceries and bills, it's a situation where they're rising faster than people's income, their wages or their benefits are increasing. So price of everything down the shops is going up, but the amount of money that we're bringing in each month, whether that's from a salary or from benefits or anything else, isn't going up at the same rate. So prices and wages are going up at different rates. And I think there's a little chart over there for those of you that are into charts. And you can see that, particularly over the past year or so, wages on average have gone up by around 5%. Whereas the price of everything else has gone up about twice as fast. So prices at the moment are rising about twice as fast as people's wages are. So the gap between the wages and the amount of the cost of everything is getting increasingly wide, and I think that's very worrying for lots of people. To put it another way, we've got the McDonald's the cheeseburger index. So I think this is quite a good example of inflation, isn't it? It's I think the McDonald's was in the news a few weeks ago because they said for the first time in 14 years they're putting up the price of a cheeseburger, from 99p to £1.19. And I think it's a sort of light-hearted thing, but it illustrates a serious point, which is that when McDonald's opened their first branch in the UK back in 1974 down in Woolwich, three cheers for South East London. 21p bought you a Big Mac. At that price, you'd pretty much eat there every night, right?
Yeah, it's funny, right?
We've got a pair of sort of McDonald's for the fans. I think all three of us. I think this is a good illustration of inflation. Is that the same cheeseburger that would have cost you 21p back in 1974 now costs £1.19. Now, obviously, relatively inexpensive thing like a cheeseburger, the price has gone up. It's gone up five or six times over that period of time, and that's true of everything. And so inflation is normal. It's normal for prices over long periods of time. Prices do increase, but what's different about what's going on at the moment is that prices and wages are rising at different rates, which is why we're finding everything more expensive. And that's, as I say, true of everyone. So I guess we're looking at all those scary looking headlines. I think it's worth kind of having a reality check and saying, how bad is it? And I think again, not too many more charts, but if you are into your charts, and I think there'll be some people on today's call who perhaps have longer memories or have been around on this earth slightly longer, will know that inflation's been an issue in the past. So for example, in August 1975, prices were increasing by almost 25%. Prices were going up by a quarter. Same, again in early 1980, and then a little bit in the early 90s. But I think for those watching today who perhaps slightly less experienced in life, should we say, to be polite, but for lots of people, inflation is something which they will be experiencing for the first time in at least in their adult lives. And so, as you can see, at the moment, inflation in the UK is running around about 10%. So it's higher than it's been in a long time. You can see it's shooting up at a really quite alarming rate. But it has been worse in the past. So I think it helps to put things into a bit of historical perspective. What we're seeing isn't really unprecedented, but it is, it's a shock, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and I think it's also worth, in terms of putting it into a wider perspective, looking at how the UK compares to other countries. So, UK is about 10%. If you go to France, it's closer to 6 or 7%. But this is something which everyone across the world, all countries across the world, are experiencing right now. So, not that it makes you feel better, but the UK isn't necessarily alone in this. But I think it is fair to say that, the rate of inflation is, relatively higher to other countries. So that's probably enough graphs, enough kind of economics chat. We'll probably move slightly onto the news chat, but I promise we will get back to talking about the ways in which that directly applies to you. So in terms of what's causing all of this, because it's, as I say, first time in 20 or 30 years we've seen inflation on these sorts of levels. So Lynn, over to you. What's going on here?
Okay, so I mean, there are several factors that are driving up inflation, some of which being the lasting impacts of the pandemic. So obviously during the pandemic, a lot of the markets were shut, and obviously during the lockdown, a lot of people were saving up money because they couldn't use their money necessarily. And so people were building up their savings, and as the markets were gradually opening up, everyone just went on a shopping spree, shopping splurge. Everyone was basically using their money that they had been saving up during the lockdown. And obviously the demand for certain things go up. So the higher the demand, the higher the price.
Well, everybody went on holiday. Everyone go on holiday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People booking flights, online shopping, all of those kind of things definitely.
So that's what kind of kicked this current sort of trend off.
Yes.
But that's not the full picture, because it's got quite a lot worse since then, hasn't it?
Yeah. And then another factor was obviously the Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
So that was back in February, wasn't it?
Yes, that was recently. So obviously with this, some of the markets were experiencing some supply shock. So certain supply of certain goods were restricted due to Russia's sanctions. Therefore, there was increase in things like oil, fuel, those kind of things, prices, and food as well. I mean, prices definitely went up for that. And to add on to that as well, certain countries were over-purchasing fuel and stuff because they knew of, the shortage of supply. So they would fuel, obviously.
So like people were doing during the pandemic with the toilet roll, but just like on a massive global scale.
Exactly.
Yeah, so some countries were going around buying up all the loo roll. Yeah. So that's global pandemic followed by a really large war. I mean, those are pretty big things that happen in the news. And I think it's it's quite a bit of a wake up call actually about the way things in the news actually can impact on our day-to-day life. So you go down to I was down and just walking past the co-op this morning. There's a sign up on the door saying we might have shortages of cooking oil because of the war in Ukraine. It's like, wow. Yeah. So it makes it real for people. I think if it wasn't already. But then there are some specific things which are sort of specific to the UK a little bit more. Right?
Yes, it's obviously impact of Brexit on the trade as well. Britain stopped importing goods from other countries. I mean, like importing goods to other countries became more expensive because of the divorce things. Obviously, they had to make new agreements, so importing the goods went really up. And it was more expensive, but Britain was exporting goods as well to Europe. That level went down, so that one has huge impact on people as well. For like normal goods, we have to import from Europe.
See, there was all the stuff, wasn't there, about sort of lorries all queued up at Dover trying to move stuff in and out of the UK, and
exactly.
related to Brexit, it's been even harder to get stuff in and out.
Exactly, because UK is not really producing everything what is in demand here, so we have to import lots of things to the island, and those prices this was having very huge impact on the prices. Going back a bit on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that one had a really huge impact on wholesale gas prices. Because Russia, in reverse of the sanctions, they obviously stopped gas supply for other countries, and then obviously other countries had to buy elsewhere if obviously there was the availability for it. Because lots of countries had their supply as well. They cannot produce suddenly the gas for every country in the world. So everything was kind of like a bit rolling like a ball. So one had impact on the other, and then another thing had impact on the other. But looking at everything, obviously everything is going up, the prices of every goods, services, wherever you go, because everyone is affected by that.
Yeah, I think there's an example there. Sometimes when you watch the news, you think, well, okay, yeah, but how does that affect me? Well, I think what we had unfortunately over the past year or so is a bit of a lesson in way. What's going on in the world really does affect all of us.
Yeah, even when you look, obviously the gas prices and the fuel. Okay, I am not driving; it doesn't affect me. But like, if I go to my hairdresser who has to go take the car and come to her place to work, her cost of delivering the service gone up. And like you can we can basically talk about it forever. So
all these prices get part. I mean,
exactly,
on
it's,
these prices
yeah,
each
it's
other,
not even about the goods, it's about services as well. Everything is going up because people have to spend more money for providing the services to the customers. So
that's a really good example. I think they had like pubs. The people that go to pubs saying they're struggling to keep their doors open because the cost of keeping the place warm, or the cost of paying their electricity bill, and so lots of small businesses, not just pubs, but all sorts of small businesses, they're struggling too, which means that in order for them to kind of pay their energy bills, they're having to charge us more money. So even when it doesn't affect us directly, it's affecting us indirectly as well. Yeah. So I think that's probably a good way to sort of to bring it that slightly bit more down to earth, because we don't want to spend the whole time making this a kind of a politics or an economics lecture. So in terms of kind of what it means for all of us, Monica.
Again, as we mentioned earlier, groceries going up, fuel, diesel is affecting everyone. Particularly when you look at the numbers, only in the UK, average house price increased by 9.8% over the year to March 2022. It's the same. Everything else what's causing the price increase. The private landlords are affected by this as well. All the interest rates applied by the banks. With the fuel and diesel, it says that reported in petrol is now at 173p per diesel. So everything is just kind of, wherever you look, one thing. That kind of spiking increase of the prices is caused by different factors. But like it's like a rolling ball. It's affecting us in any way. It does affect everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for me, with regards to like energy, I'm someone that's always cold, and before I would, not to say I was careless, but I could have like, the heater as long as, I could, I wanted to be on. But now I need to be mindful of that because of gas and so forth. You just have to get, if you're cold, you need to just have it on for, just enough to get you warm, but you can't like, be careless and just have it on the whole night. Not to say that it's a good thing to do in the first place, but I get what I mean. You just now have to be more cautious and more mindful because obviously the cost of living. So a lot of things have to like change.
I think I think mindful is the right word. I think I think there'll be a lot of people, and perhaps including people on the call, who were struggling even before this crisis, and it's probably different for them because actually they've been struggling and struggling for a long time. Yeah. But I think that if you were managing before all this cost of living crisis, I think you're absolutely right. What it means is actually everybody having to be a bit more mindful about, be a bit more careful and a bit more mindful about what you're spending money on, and making sure that you perhaps prioritising a little bit more and things like that. We'll come on to some of that stuff about what can be done about it in a second. But I think before we do that, I wanted to sort of just focus on specifically on two areas: energy bills and benefits. And I think these are two areas where I think energy bills in particular, ridiculously high. I think, at one point over the summer, people, talking about energy bills over 3,500, 4,000, ridiculous. No one really knows what's going on with energy bills. But I think, it's worth saying that certainly the politicians and we can roll our eyes and whatever you think about the politicians, and obviously we've got a new prime minister and a new chancellor, and whatever you think about all of that, I think it's worth saying that, at the government level, that they're aware that there's an issue, at least with energy bills, and actually there has been some effort over the past few months to try and put some kind of support in place for people. So as the kind of the slide here shows, I think Everybody's receiving, either has received or is in the process of receiving some, some extra money to help along with the cost of those energy bills. So if you pay council tax, I think that's coming through to you. So it'll be kind of like paid as a refund on council tax. But then there's also, it was announced a few months ago, this, in fact, a few weeks ago, actually, in terms of this package of support to help keep the cost of energy itself under control. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. I think the other area is around benefits, and I think particularly people who rely on benefits as their main income, or people on lower incomes in general. Again, there'll be an additional payment there, so look out for that or ask about that. If you've got questions about whether or not you might be eligible for that, some details on there. But yeah, there is help on the way around energy and benefits. I think we can have a kind of a discussion about whether it's enough or whether it's done in the right way, and if that's your thing, that's all over the place at the moment. But there is something in place in those two areas, and so if you are interested in finding out more about that, it's worth having a look to see what's out there. I think just on that specific one, there's been a lot of stuff and almost a little bit of confusion about what's going on with energy. I think when they announced this last week, there was this headline around kind of 2,500 government kind of putting an energy price cap in place, so that households wouldn't pay more than £2,500 a year, which is, by the way, still a lot of money compared to what we're paying a year in terms of what people would pay on energy. I think it's really important to be clear on this one. They put in place a cap on the price of energy, which means that for an average household, average size house, average size family, they're going to pay around 2,500. That's not the maximum that you can be charged for energy. So don't use that as your sort of don't use that as your cue to turn up the thermostat. Turn your house into a sauna, because it's still possible to pay more than £2,500 a year in energy, and lots of larger families, larger households, larger houses will pay more than 2,500, and it's nothing's changed. If you use more energy, you're going to be charged more for it. So don't go crazy here. But what it's all about is making sure that if previously on average you spent around 1,500, you're going to spend on average 2,500. So it's keeping it down at a relative level. But lots of households will spend more than that, and some will spend less than that as well. So I think it's important to understand what exactly has been announced and what hasn't been announced. And I think, again, as with all of these tips, a few tips up on screen about ways that you might want to start thinking about saving money on energy. And I think, lots of websites like the Money Saving Expert, Money Advice Service, Energy Savings Trust, lots of places on the internet where you can get advice on ways to cut back and save money on your energy bills. And I think there are a few examples up on here. Looking more generally beyond energy, I think next week we're going to talk about some things which might help. And I think the emphasis here is on the word might. As I said at the start, doing all of these things may still mean that you're gonna struggle this winter. And I think it's important to be upfront about that. But if you are thinking about ways that you might be able to try and cope, got some ideas on the next slide that might be able to might get you thinking, might start getting you brainstorming. So Linz.
Yeah, okay, so some of the things which might help, and again, emphasis on the might, because not everything will be applicable to everyone. So firstly, it's reviewing your budget. So that would mean just looking at your past bank statements, looking at your income and if your expenditure, seeing what you could potentially cut out. And I say potentially because, as I said before, it's not easy, and it may, in that particular instance, there may be things that you just cannot cut out. And that's okay, but I think it is worth reviewing your expenses and seeing what you could potentially cut out, just try and see where you can save where you can. Another thing would be to cut back on non-essential spending. So that would be, you could compare your fuel and diesel prices in your local area. You could use an online platform for this to basically use the cheaper option for this. There's also a lot of things you could do with regards to research for places that offer 50% discounts for meals or even activities in London. It's not to say that because of the cost of living crisis you shouldn't have a life anymore, but there are ways that you can still enjoy yourself but save money while doing so. I mean, there's lots of places that do 2-for-1 specials, 50% discounts. So it's worth having a look into. Another thing you could do is save and, as you put there, if you can, because it's a very trying financial time at the minute and not everyone can save. But if you can, I think that would be the best thing.
Probably more important than ever, really, isn't it? If you're lucky enough to be in a position to
save. If you're lucky enough, to save for a rainy day and then go for it.
It's for lots of people it's already that rainy day. But I think if you are still in a lucky enough position to have a little bit of excess cash each month, even if it's £5 or £10, however much money you've got there, you're lucky enough to be in a position to save. We can't say it strongly enough. Keep on saving because it's more important than ever. Because actually, what having some savings gives you is it insulates you against. Look, we don't know how this ends or where this goes, and in that way, it's very scary. But actually, what you do by having some savings is you give yourself a bit of a cushion there, and hopefully that means that you have to worry a little bit less. In terms of sort of, I think Lindsay's kind of, you hit the nail on the head a minute ago in terms of when you talk about mindfulness. I think what the budget and the spending is all about is just being a bit more mindful, and about knowing where you're at with things. So, knowing how much have I got coming in, how much am I spending, and being a bit more mindful. And that doesn't mean that those two figures are going to add up. Doing a budget doesn't solve your problems, but it allows you to understand what your problems might be, but also what some of the opportunities might be. In terms of like bigger scale stuff, Monica.
Yeah, biggest goal would be like lifestyle changes. I know it's just like hard to suddenly make like a big decision about giving up the car or moving somewhere outside London, for example, because when you get used to something, obviously it's easy and it's comfortable. But sometimes when you think about it, like some of these big decisions will make a big difference in your income and your money you can save. For example, with the car. If you're alone and then, for example, you've got the car, obviously bear in mind like the car cost, then the fuel, all the condition charges. Maybe it would be cheaper just to get the train or the bus or tube, whichever. I know it's less comfortable than having the car, but if you look at the current situation in the market, this could be the way of basically maybe like doing this big change, so you don't have to resign from the other ones. What Liz was previously saying. It's
it's different people's lifestyles. People have got different priorities, and so we're not saying everyone goes out and get rid of the car. Jingle
the options around. What is like obviously what is easy thing you think you can get rid of, and then it's basically with everyone is different,
Some people will find it easier to make one big change rather than lots of little ones.
Little ones, yeah. It just obviously depends as well on how much I can save by doing these little changes, or if it's better just to do this one big change. Living outside London is another one. When you think about your own personal situations and where you live, or if there is obviously another way to try to save. By changing the lifestyle. The other one is income maximization. With income maximization, lots of people are not aware that they might be entitled to extra benefits or extra payments from the government because maybe they haven't researched about it or they are not sure. Government is having a good a good article and good link on their website where you can calculate your benefits. It's called benefits calculator. When you Google it, it gives you the options to put your personal information, like what household have you got, how many people, what age, and based on all of this information they are asking you for, they will be able to judge like what kind of benefits you are entitled to. There are different kinds of benefits: child benefits, disability allowance, income support, all other sorts of benefits. The other one is as well, there is another website called untitled.co.uk. That one is the similar one in the way of like finding out if you might get extra money from the government if you don't know about it. So it's our advice to you.
Let's face it, benefits haven't gone up sometimes it can be very tough, but I think it is worth using those websites. So I think that's the government benefits calculator and entitled.co.uk, two websites where they'll take you through. They'll ask you a whole set of questions in terms of about your kind of your family setup, your living setup, and it will really help you to make sure that actually you're claiming everything you're entitled to. Because as Martha says, there may be benefits that you're entitled to which you're not currently claiming, which can make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, if you prefer as well, obviously, like if you prefer to talk to someone about it, there are lots of different citizens advisors in your local area.
Citizen
Advice, just go there, explain the situation, and I'm sure someone will be able to help and just give you proper information.
So before we move on to talk specifically about credit unions, social tariffs. That was an interesting one, which I think when we were researching today's session, social tariffs. What's that all about, Martha?
Social tariffs was basically looking at the different mobile and phone providers in the area. So social tariffs, when, for example, COVID started, lots of obviously households had the issues to pay the broadbands, to pay Wi-Fi because the children had to work, the children had to run their school lessons from home. So those companies applied like discounts for those kind of families who are on the low income. So
it's basically special broadband and mobile tariffs, which are only available to people on lower incomes. And so if your household is a particularly low income, or you know that you rely on benefits and things like that, actually there's help available for paying your mobile phone bill and broadband, because I think there's those perhaps 10 or 15 years ago those were sort of those were a bit of a luxury, but having an internet connection these days it's a bit like energy and water. It's a necessity now. So I think it's important to be aware that those are available as well. So before we move on to sort of answering any questions today, just wanted to kind of wrap up by, again, the emphasis being here on could, but ways that credit union membership could help. Because I think, again, as a credit union, we're here to help you make the most of your money, to make your money go further. That said, we're not in charge of the economy. We can't create money that doesn't exist already. But I think it's worth us talking a little bit about some of the tools, some of the ways you might be able to use your account as a way, that might make things just a tiny bit a little bit more helpful for people this winter.
Yeah, from the suggestions, we, for example, online budgeting tools on our website, you can find this option. It gives you, so basically you put your income you get per month and spending, so you can revise of so when you put this data, more or less what is the option to save. We obviously, like with myself, I try to save as much as I can, but obviously sometimes there is a month I spend more than the others. But every little helps, even if you save £5 a month. This is the money you put on the side. You just kind of they stay there for emergency, and obviously, like in the situation now, these emergencies do happen. Just like be mindful about this money, that suddenly when you've got extra payment from anywhere, I've got £200, let's go for the spending spree. Change this habit, change this, like, okay, I'm going to put this £200 on the side just because of the future situation. It's just like this kind of online budgeting tools will help you with that.
I think that's a really good tool, isn't it? So on our website, you enter everything you know about your income, how much money you make each month,
you spend,
how much you spend, and then it'll take you through step by step, saying, okay, how much you spend on food, how much you spend on online subscriptions, how much you spend on energy, how much you spend on gas, and at the end it will give you a really nice, neat little summary which has a nice little graph showing you basically where all your money goes each month. And so if you're looking for a place to start in terms of budgeting, that's a really tool that I can recommend.
Yeah, as well, helping building savings. Once you start saving with us, even this £5 a month, as I mentioned, this is the money you save, and this is the money we don't block on your account. Once you've got online banking or even coming to the branch, you can access this money anytime you like. So, it's not like ISA that you have to have it on hold and you cannot touch for another 2-3 years. This is the money which is yours. You keep saving it for Christmas, for holidays, for whatever reason you like. And once you've got online banking, you can transfer this money to your current account anytime you like. Staying updated on your budget. That one very similar to the other two. Is just like think about this incomes and spendings. Review. Each of us has to review the budget in the current situations. I don't know how my energy bill is going to be, how much my income, how much my other bills are going to be, but reviewing, like review. I know like reviewing the money and the wallet is
No one
not
likes,
really.
no one likes
No
doing
one,
that.
no one. I was actually genuinely scared. Checking my bill for the gas. I was like scared to open this email just to see these numbers. But because I was saving through the years, luckily I like surplus, so I know I will be fine for another maybe 1 2 months. I don't know. It's just these little tools that you can basically play around, like just revise your budget and see where you can save.
So I think a good example there is our text messaging service. So if you want to know what your current bank balance is, you can text BAL, BAL, to 811. That's BAL to 811, and you'll immediately get a text message back telling you your bank balance. And again, in times like these, that can be bad news or it can be good news. But I think either way, whether it's good news or bad news, if there was ever a time to just keep an eye on your bank balance, to keep yourself up to date on how you're doing, what's going in, what's going out, to be brave and to look at your bank statement. With these things, it's always better to know where exactly where you stand. It's better to know than to not know. I think just last two ways. These won't be for everyone, but ways that potentially help. I think if you're in the situation of at the moment you're just about managing, just about making ends meet. You're keeping up to date with all your commitments. You're paying your bills on time. You're not missing payments. If you're just about managing, but you're a little bit concerned that you might be teetering on the brink. One option to look at is potentially consolidation loans. So that won't be for everyone, but consolidation loan. If you've racked up a bit of a credit card bill, racked up a bit of an overdraft, and you're looking for a way to get that paid off, and if you're in a position where you can get it paid off, and you're looking to get it paid off a little bit faster and perhaps save yourself some interest, that could be an option for some of our members. And then I think that the final one to say is that for almost the other end of the spectrum, if you've got a loan with us already and your situation has changed, so you're working fewer hours, or you've lost your job, or something's happened, something in your life has changed and the situation has changed. It's always better to come and talk to us about that sooner rather than later, so that we can speak, we can have a conversation about ways that we might be able to help you and support you through that. I think being open and speaking to us if the situation changes is always going to be better than burying your head in the sand until it gets worse. So I think that's probably hopefully not too much of a downbeat. I think it would be it'd be very hard to try and do an upbeat version of this month's session. So I'm sorry, on your Thursday lunchtime, but hopefully that was a good summary of what is, gives you a better idea of what's going on, why it's going on, and some of the ways that you might be able to start to cope with it. So hopefully that's useful to everyone today. I think without further ado, if there are any questions, really happy to take those today, and we'll do our best to answer. As I say, no crystal ball here. Who knows what the future holds, but we'll do our best to answer any questions. So if you have got a question, feel free to pop it into the chat now, and we'll do our best to answer it. I think the other thing to say is that if you've got any specific feedback on today's session, or a question which you'd like to discuss with us in private, or something which is a bit more kind of personal, specific to you, our email address, feedback@creditunion.co.uk, straight up on the screen. That goes straight through to Monica. So Monica will see all of those, and she'll make sure they get followed up by the appropriate team. And just a reminder that obviously the purpose of these sessions is to provide financial education. So it's providing you with general information which kind of applies to a whole range of people in a range of different situations. I think it's really important to be clear, particularly this month, that we're not giving individual financial advice. If you are unsure about what you specifically should do in your circumstances, or what course of action is right for you, it's really important to say that nothing we've said in today's session, you shouldn't go off and make radical changes to your finances based on today's session. If you are unsure, it's always best to go and get independent financial advice that's personal to you. So I think want to make that really clear to everyone today. I can see we've got one question here, so I just drop the mouse. Let's have a look. So Sean would like to know, is it true that inflation erodes savings? If so, what type of account should one use to avoid savings decreasing? That's a good question. So yes, inflation in effect erodes your savings. If you've got £100 in your savings now, and you had £100 in your savings 6 months ago, you'll still have £100 in your savings in a year's time. So the monetary value, the quantity of pounds in your savings account doesn't change as a result of inflation. What does change is your spending power. So what that £100 buys you will be less right now, will be less than what £100 bought you a year ago. And if inflation continues to rise in a year's time, that £100 in terms of what it buys you will be less. So that's what people mean when they talk about inflation eroding your savings. And so you're right to ask about types of savings account. If you're looking for your inflation, if you're looking for your savings not to be eroded by inflation, what you're looking for is a savings account that pays you a relatively high rate of interest, or gives you a type of investment that gives you a high rate of return. That being said, that's kind of easier said than done. So despite the fact that inflation is running at around 10% at the moment, even now, most bank savings accounts are, you'll be lucky to get a bank savings account that pays you perhaps more than 5% at the moment. So even then, your savings will be rising at 5%, but prices will be rising at 10%. So even then, effectively, the value of your savings is falling. Really, at the moment, the only way to keep up with inflation is through other types of investment, which I think, as we talked about last month, can often be risky. So, things like stock market, bonds, all of those more complicated financial products where really you need to do your research and get advice and know what you're doing. But if you really are determined to make sure that your savings aren't being eroded by inflation, then probably that's the sort of route which is going to be the one that you want to go down. But again, on that, if that's your priority for you, go and speak to someone and get proper advice on that, because most bank savings rates are not, I don't know of any banks at the moment who are paying savings rates of 10% or above. So hopefully that's a kind of a useful explanation of what we mean by inflation taking a bite out of your savings. But as I say, there's not necessarily any straightforward, easy answers to that. Any more questions from anybody on here today? You're very welcome, Sean. I'm glad that we had a good stab at answering that one. Any more for any more? Otherwise we'll. Oh, no more questions today. Oh, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for today's session. As I say, slightly new setup here. What do you guys think? Do you think it works?
It's fine.
Yeah. It's a bit nicer rather than us all sort of being sat in front of our computers staring at the screen. I'm aware that this month, the audio quality might have been a little bit lower and the microphone's perhaps a little bit less quiet than usual. That's something which we're going to work on for next month's session. I hope you are able to join us. We'll be emailing details of that out soon. And then in the meantime, have a great month, everybody. And hopefully what you learned today was really helpful. As I say, any more kind of individual questions for us about ways that we can help you specifically with your account. If you've got a question about your account with us at London Mutual, need help getting set up with online banking. We've got questions about current accounts, loans, or other ways to make the most of your membership. Our details are up here on the screen. help@creditunion.co.uk. Obviously, you're always very welcome to visit one of our branches if you are based here in London. So Peckham and Walworth Road. If you've got online banking, and if you haven't on online banking, we'd be happy to help you get that set up. Monica can help you with that one.
Just send the email at how.creditunion.
Yeah, and we can get you up and running with online banking. But again, if you've already got online banking, you can send us a secure message through that. Last one is calling us on 020 3773 1751. Interestingly, over the next few weeks, we're actually going to be relaunching our telephone call center. So a bit of a kind of inside scoop there. But if you have called us in the past and you've had problems getting through and it's taken a little bit longer, thank you very much for bearing with us. That is something which we're working on, and I think over the next few weeks we'll be kind of sending around an email explaining the improvements that we're going to be making to that in the months ahead. So lots of different ways to contact us, lots of different ways to stay in touch. Thank you again for joining us, and on that note, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good month.
Thank
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.